It's the finale, girls! Hello babies, and welcome to D-Talk, your safe space to explore your creativity, expand your critical thinking skills, prime yourself for connection, and a 4C that I don't remember. I'm your host David, and today is the finale of season 2. I'm so happy, I'm so excited, and we are going to talk about self-care, taking care of yourself, Take care of yourself, girl. We're going to talk about that. So let's get into it. All right. So in this episode, we are going to talk about self-care, taking care of yourself. It's almost two separate kind of concepts here because we have self-care with like a capital S and a capital C, something that has been a little bit bastardized or used a little bit more flippantly than I think it necessarily should be in our modern culture. And then we have this idea of taking care of yourself, and taking care of yourself and self-care are not the same thing to me. So we're going to outline the differences between those two things. We're going to talk about what self-care is not. We're going to talk about a lot of different ways that you can take care of yourself, probably strengthen some of the ways that you're already doing it, because if you're listening to this podcast, you obviously are taking care of yourself to some degree. So we're going to discuss some things that will maybe take you a little bit farther in that self-care journey or that taking care of yourself journey, because they're not the same thing, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about some of the ways that I like to take care of myself. Yeah, and then we're going to finish off our episode, and that will be the end of season 2 of D-Talk. I can't believe we're here. This is episode 13, self-care. I can't believe we're already here. I'm going to have my emotional, personal moment at the end when I talk about the direction of this podcast. So if you're interested in that, you can stick around, but let's dive into self-care. So the difference between self-care and taking care of yourself, I believe, is very important, because you need to recognize the difference between these two things when you're consuming any kind of self-care content. There's so much self-care content out in the world. And as I was doing my research for this podcast episode, I was bombarded with ad upon ad. And it's giving multi-level marketing. There are so many people out here who are attempting to monetize their self-care, or rather they want to sell you their self-care solutions, like, the AG1 pyramid scheme, allegedly. I don't know if AG1 is actually a pyramid scheme, but like the AG1 greens, that thing really swept the nation. There's all different kinds of like green juices is what I'm thinking of. So this like self-care, capitalized, capitalistic, monetary based kind of self-care, I think can be pretty harmful to folks who are out there seeking self-care content. So we're not really going to talk about self-care in this capitalized way. We're going to talk about taking care of yourself, because that is highly individualized. It's malleable over time, and your whole life is kind of experimenting with different ways of taking care of yourself to figure out what works for you. I'll say that as well, right? You listening to this, and especially when we talk about what I do to take care of myself, that might not work for you. And honestly, it might not even be working for me, because my perspective is biased, because my perspective is my perspective and it's about me. So I need you to take these things critically. It's not a black and white situation. You need to be able to be critical of the information you are taking in. Critical thinking, of course, is one of our C's. We've recorded a podcast about critical thinking. And this is also very cyclical in nature too. There's so many different things that go into this idea of self-care. So if you're interested, there are other podcasts where we talk about critical thinking, growth mindset, inclusive language. So many of these different pieces can fit into how you take care of yourself. And we're not really going to be discussing a lot of these things in detail. It's kind of going to be more of a broad overview about what self-care is, why you should do it, and different ways that you can continue your self-care journey. So if we're going to talk about the capitalization of self-care industries, the green juices is a really big, important place to start. This idea that people perpetuate that, because our food is just so bad, and there's no nutrients in our food anymore because the soil and chemtrails, and it gets very, what's the word, conspiracy theorist quite quickly here. And you see the things like a liver detox and a heart detox and a lung detox, and you can do all of these things to take care of your body. I've fallen for some of those, I will say, for lack of a better word, scams, because I think they are fundamentally scams. There are people who are attempting to monetize your self-care. So whenever you're consuming a piece of self-care content or information or advice or anything, you need to be considering the motive, right? My motive here giving you this advice is that I want you to have the best life possible. I'm not monetizing this in any way other than you might be watching an ad on my YouTube video, or I might try and convince you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or leave a review on Spotify. That's really the extent of my motivation here in providing this self-care content. So that doesn't mean you're not going to be critical of me, but you need to have this critical eye when you are consuming any kind of self-care thing, because if people are out here to make money, they're probably lying to you. And maybe not lying to you, they might think what they're telling you is true and accurate, but ultimately they're not positioned to share this information in any way that sounds professional or authoritarian, because a lot of these people are not. So the green juices, these people who are monetizing things, you probably don't need green juices. You probably don't need all of these different detoxes because, hey, if you're a human with kidneys, your body's detoxing all the time, right? Our bodies are capable of quite a bit here. So we're going to discuss probably more the neuroscientific ways that you can engage in different actions and behaviors and activity that will improve your mental state, because I think self-care, for me at least, it's all about your mental state and your mental health. So that is paramount. Your mental health is number one. So I think the most important thing that you can engage in if you are somebody who is attempting to take care of yourself, which I think that should be you, taking care of yourself should be paramount in your list of priorities in your life, even though it can kind of fall back and get lost in the shuffle. I understand, I've been there, but therapy is probably number one. And it isn't always accessible. It's not always valuable as well. You can have therapists that don't practice necessarily the most effective ways for you to help yourself. But if that is something that is available to you, I would really recommend taking those opportunities to go to therapy. I've had an aversion to therapy for a while. Well, I've been in therapy now for almost a decade and I love it. It's the best time. I really do like therapy. That's not to say it's always easy, because it's not. It's hard, it's difficult. It is work as well. So it can be challenging to fit that in with the busyness of your day. Going to therapy can feel like going to your second job at times, especially if you're going frequently and you're working through some difficult things. So I'm getting ahead of myself again. So in order to understand what self-care is and really flesh out this idea of what it can look like for you, we need to discuss what self-care is not. So when I went into Google and I typed in self-care, I wanted to find some scammy things. And it's filled with the sponsored posts for the green juices and the detoxes, and people are selling you a dream with a product that has no proven clinical or scientific studies behind the claims that they're making. And this is where we get almost into the MLM world. So be careful. I know I've said that so many times, but besties, people want your money. People want your money. I don't want your money, but I do want your attention because I love talking, and I'm so glad that you're here. So thanks for that. So I'm going to take you on a journey to oprahdaily.com. And this is not a smear campaign, like Candace Owens would say, against Oprah. I don't really know much about Oprah. I don't really care that much about Oprah. But Oprah does have... oh God, but Oprah does have an article on oprahdaily.com about self-care. And not how to take care of yourself, but this big capitalized idea of self-care. So there are a few different tips that supposedly Oprah is telling us, but it's probably not. It's probably some intern who's writing all of these things. And number one is stop hitting the snooze button. Now, this is a difficult one because while I can understand where they're coming from, because if you're chronically hitting the snooze button, it might mean that you are sleep deprived. It might mean that you could have a nutrient deficiency. It might mean that you need more magnesium. There are scientific studies between how your nutrients affect your sleep, how magnesium can affect your sleep. However, if you are hitting the snooze button, and the way that these things are written, that's another thing too. If people are trying to shame you into a purchase, into a behavior, that's a red flag. So with these ideas of like, stop hitting the snooze button because you're just a lazy piece of shit and you just need to wake up. And that guy that says like, I wake up at 4 a.m. every day and I have 3 days in one day. And my first day is from 4 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then my second day is from noon until 3. And then my third day is from 4 until 7. So I get 3 days for every your one. You stack that up over a week, you're done. You stack that up over a year, you're toast. That kind of stuff is super harmful. And I don't think shame is a good motivator. And that's not just me. There have been clinical studies that show that shaming yourself into a behavior change may work momentarily, but if you're shaming yourself, it's not going to work over a long period of time. So stop that. I'm going to shame you into stop shaming yourself. And it is hard. It's a really hard pattern to get out of that can be helped in therapy. There it is again. Go to therapy if that's available to you. So yes, stop hitting the snooze button. Okay, if it's a chronic habit that's affecting your life in negative ways, it can be something that you can start to look into, because you always need to be asking why. Why are you hitting the snooze button? Because the answer to taking care of yourself is to not sleep less. It's not that if your body's telling you when you wake up in the morning that you are tired and you want to sleep more, that doesn't mean that you need to fight against your body and get up. It just means that maybe we should start to look inward as to why you want more sleep, right? Because there is an amount of sleep that the human body goes through, and then you do wake up not feeling sleepy, right? That is possible. You've had those experiences, but it's really finding out the behaviors that lead you to getting a good night's sleep. Sleep is so important. Sleep is a really big one here. Okay, so the next one says light a candle. This is really proving my point of what self-care is not. Again, aromatherapy has been studied. It can be good. You know, I'm a girl who loves a good candle. I like a scent. I like the visual of something burning in my house. Like lighting a candle can be good, but it's almost like, yeah, you just need to light a candle and your depression will go away. Maybe that's just me reading this in a super dramatic way. Let me know in the comments if you understand where I'm coming from here, because lighting a candle isn't going to solve your problems. It might be something that will momentarily make you enjoy your life a little bit more, but God, honestly, girls, lighting a candle, that's on the self-care list. The next one is get a house plant. Okay, I'm a plant girly. I love plants. I've had plant phases. I ran a whole greenhouse out of my home where I was selling plants to people online through COVID. That was a weird time in my life. So I understand the positive nature of getting a plant, and I wouldn't even recommend against it. But self-care, that's not self-care. That's not self-care. That's just doing things that you enjoy, which is fine. And the idea of like, it keeps your air cleaner and it boosts your mood, and like, yeah, okay, that's true. It can be true. But is it going to make a difference to where you actually feel something in your body change? No, probably not. Because then you get gnats and mites and fruit flies, and then you're spraying it with an insecticide, and then that's in the air. It has the potential to not really be that impactful for you in positive ways. The next one is start a side hustle. Yeah, because that's what we need to be doing. I don't mean to sound so negative with this, but honestly, if you're looking to take care of yourself, and if you feel like there's a deficit in your self-care routine, starting a side hustle probably shouldn't even be on the top 10 of your priorities here. Maybe engaging in things that you enjoy doing, that might be part of self-care, but monetizing it in the terms of a side hustle is probably not going to help you. The next one says, trade your coffee for a soothing cup of tea, which, okay, I can understand where we're coming from, because caffeine can make you nervous and increase anxiety and this and that. But caffeine also, for me, at least personally, makes me able to greet the day in the morning. I don't know if I can necessarily function that well without caffeine. That's probably just me personally, but I know somebody listening to this identifies with that as well. It's just all these little changes, and I don't really know if Oprah is attempting to monetize this beyond the traffic to her website, but this isn't going to help. I'm sorry. If you actually feel a meaningful deficit in your self-care routine, switching your tea for coffee, I think that's probably going to make you more irritable, at least in the beginning. The next one, write in a gratitude journal. For the love of God, Oprah, get this together. And again, I don't disagree with all of this, but I think maybe from my perspective, I'm reading this as somebody who would at one point in their lives think, I just need to get a nice cup of tea and get a journal and light a candle, and then all my problems are going to be solved, and that's taking care of myself. When really a lot of these things involve spending money. And not that the things that I'm going to walk you through later don't cost things, but they're actually going to be more beneficial to you if you start to work out the cost-benefit analysis. Like writing in a gratitude journal, okay, gratitude has shown to be very positive for folks who practice it. Journaling has shown to be very positive for folks who practice it. I love journaling. And honestly, these podcasts are kind of like extended video journals for me as well, because I'm talking myself through a lot of these concepts that I also need solidification in how I think about these things. So writing in a gratitude journal is good, but I think there's other things that you can do that will be better. Number 10 is dance with abandon. And then there's this really cheesy stock photo image of somebody dancing with an iPod with headphones that still have the cord on it because it's 2009. Like, sure, dancing can be helpful. Physical activity is very helpful. We'll get to that later. The next one says order takeout. Like, I get it. It takes the stress away from not cooking if that's something that takes a lot of your time and you don't particularly enjoy doing it. I get it. The next one says, look at pictures of cute animals. Yeah. This is the idea, right? It's like, okay, all of these things, they're not necessarily bad. All of these things can be part of a healthy lifestyle that includes taking care of yourself. But honestly, I don't think if you sit down and look at pet pictures for an hour as you're scrolling through Instagram, that's probably not going to improve the ways that you're taking care of yourself. And then the very last one says take a break, which can be good. I like the body keeps the score, WOW presents plus. Like we've heard this, we've seen this, we get it. Taking a break can be beneficial, but sometimes, and this is a great segue for us to take it into the next section, sometimes self-care, because we do live in a capitalistic hellscape, people are really bad at taking breaks and people are really bad at relaxing. And I am one of those people. I don't know if you've noticed the amount of online content that I've been pushing out here in the last few months, up to a year now, but I have a really big problem relaxing. Or not a problem, I feel really challenged by relaxing. It is hard for me to relax because if I think about it, what does me relaxing actually look like? Because it's not sitting down. It's just not. I don't feel relaxed when I'm sitting down unless I'm like doing something right now. And maybe what I mean by sitting down is like sitting at the TV and watching something and like eating popcorn at the end of the night. I really do have trouble relaxing. Where do I relax? When I'm out with my friends, when I'm engaged in conversation with other folks, when I'm meeting new people, when I'm doing all of this other stuff that doesn't involve me actually carrying out an act that isn't monetized, right? And I really wonder if you struggle with this as well. So if you struggle with relaxing in really casual settings, especially when you're alone, let me know in the comments because I would really love to feel like I'm not alone in this one. I just have trouble relaxing, and that's because of the ways that I grew up. That's the ways that is partly because of the ways that capitalism has instilled an anxiety within me to always be working, ABW, always be working, always be monetizing. I need to feel productive. And I have this really big, overwhelming sense of dread that I am wasting time because I feel like I need to be doing things that are productive for me, which is harmful in itself. So when we're talking about self-care, a lot of it is deconstructing the ways in which you feel anxiety and the ways in which you feel that anxiety is taking over your life in ways that it doesn't necessarily have to, because a lot of this stuff we do have control over. It is simple, but it's not easy. But that's not to say that chemical imbalances in the brain don't play a role in this as well. Like if you can't make your own dopamine, store-bought is fine. If you have been prescribed things like an SSRI or something by a psychiatrist or a medical professional, like all of these things can contribute to a positive life experience that includes self-care. So it's not that you have control over everything and you don't need medication for it. It's that you need to be doing all of it at once. If medication is part of your life, and if it is something that contributes to you being able to take care of yourself in positive ways that are cost efficient, because cost is a part of this, right? If we all had $1 million, it would probably be easier to take care of ourselves, but ultimately a lot of us don't. So that is a limiting factor for a lot of folks. Okay, so now we're going to walk through some self-care strategies that I think are definitely more helpful than those colloquial examples that we found on oprahdaily.com. But the first one is sleep. Sleep has a huge effect on how you feel both emotionally and physically, and not getting enough can cause major health issues. But stress and other distractions can wreak havoc on our sleep. So some big factors that you can have control over is your sleep hygiene. So the amount of screen time that you have in the few hours leading up to sleep, if you are eating in the few hours before you go to sleep, the temperature, your bedding, the amount of light in the room, the sound, all of these things can contribute to the quality of sleep that you have. And this is really the crux of this self-care idea that I want to really go after in this episode, is that it's not these things that you need to go out and just be more grateful and buy a journal and buy a candle. So much of this is your mental health and the mental state of your brain. And through the lens of therapy, or if you're somebody who is self-motivated enough to read books and studies and things like that, be careful. Again, you need to be critical because people can sell you a pipe dream because they want to sell you your book. But if you're interested in these things and researching and learning about them on your own, it can be very helpful. That's the category that I have fallen into at times. But I have been reading a lot of neuroscience studies, not only because of the courses that I'm in, not only because I was particularly interested before I was even accepted into the program that I'm in, and I'm also in therapy at the same time. So all of these things in tandem can really contribute to you having a better understanding of your brain, because most everybody does have the same structure of the brain. There, of course, are outliers, but most typically the structure of the human brain is pretty consistent among folks, men, women, everybody else in between. But the function of our brain is definitely very different. And a lot of the times we do actually have the power to change the function of our brain through habit forming, through a lot of different interventions that can include work you do with yourself, things that you read, the habits that you form, the therapy that you're in. So if you are in a spot of not being able to take care of yourself, being really hard on yourself, shaming yourself, feeling full of anxiousness and that, you can achieve a different function of your brain, even though the structure remains the same. So now we're going to talk about your nutrition and what you eat and those things like that. It isn't this big, like, grandiose idea of like, you're a gut and you just need to be able to absorb nutrients and take my AG1 and drink the green juice. Like, that's really not it. Nutrition isn't really that complicated as well. I remember when I grew up, there was the food pyramid, right? And it was, you need to consume all of these things in a day in these different fractions, and then you'll just be good. And that doesn't really work for a lot of folks, especially in our world where fast food and things like that are very accessible, and sometimes they're not necessarily cheaper, but they are easier, and money is time. So I understand the perspective of going out to McDonald's is cheaper than going to shop at Costco and then prepping your own food. And especially when we're talking about places like Costco, it is a higher output of money outright, but then you do get it back over time. But there are all these skills that are involved in food preservation and food prep and freezing things and knowing when things go bad and how to use things. And so if you're struggling with making your own food and consuming nutrient dense food on a regular basis, I would recommend when you go out and when you are eating out in the world, if you're somebody that does that, pay attention to what you like and ask questions. What's in this? What's that spice? You know, like really start to figure out what is interesting to you and what you would like to make on your own, because novelty has an impact on the human brain that is so meaningful and motivating. So if you can find things, if you like tinkering around, and I love tinkering, I love sitting down and like figuring things out and like the science and the physics of everything and like how cooking is done. And that might be unique to me because I do have a fundamental interest in the way that things work. I just love learning, honestly, is where we're going with this. And that might be just me. I know a lot of folks aren't interested in that, but you can kind of trick your motivation into doing something that is novel. So figure out something from a restaurant that you've really liked and try and replicate it, you know, experiment with these things. And then eventually you will build kind of a catalog of things that you can make that are quite simple, not because they're simple, but because you've done it many times. So think about the things that you like to eat when you're out in restaurants and start playing around with that at home, because the meals you're making are probably going to be a lot more healthy and nutrient dense than what you are finding out in the outside world. I want to be really intentional in the ways that I speak about my journey, especially when it comes to nutrition, because I think fat phobia definitely exists out there in the world, and there can be a lot of harmful attitudes when it comes to the food that you're putting in your body, when it comes to potential goals of losing weight. So really quickly, my story, I weighed about 330 pounds 2.5 years ago. I'm now at like 180. So I've lost a lot of weight. I've been in the gym. I'm building muscle. And really, I struggled for my entire life since I could talk and walk and have a conception of self. I didn't like my body. I wasn't happy with it. And I was always overweight, like morbidly super obese. Super obese was the category that I was put in by doctors in the past. It was brutal to listen to. And it really affected my relationship with food. And I know a lot of people don't have a healthy relationship with food on either side of the spectrum, whether you are overeating or undereating. And there are other things that contribute to that, like anxiety and attention disorders. And a lot of other things can influence the way that you behave when you are eating. But a lot of it just comes down to your awareness of things and your awareness around what you're putting in your body and the nutrition labels, and just understanding what a nutrition label is and how it works and your daily values and things like that. Something that has been particularly meaningful to me as somebody who has been on a weight loss journey in particular is that you don't want to alienate carbs in particular, and you don't want to eliminate any of your macronutrients, right? So if you don't know, this is going to be very peripheral, and I don't have really the education beyond my own personal research for me, but you have 3 macronutrients: protein, carbohydrates, and fats. And it's really important to keep those in balance depending on what your goals with your nutrition are. Something really interesting that I came across when it comes to this is that a lot of people like to eliminate carbs because carbs are the enemy, I think, for a lot of folks, which is fundamentally not the case. To a point, our brains do need carbs to function. Not really that many. Like it's not like you're going to say, I need this pizza so my brain can function. That's not the tea at all, because there are carbs in pretty much everything we consume. But something that I've learned in terms of nutrition is that you can have carbs days and you can have fat days. That might be something to look into. That was really helpful to me, because you don't want to have fat and carbs together. You want to have carbs on one day and fats on the other day. And I'm not really going to go that much further into that, but the research that I've come across so far is that you should be having fat days and carb days. And if you mix those, like you can, it doesn't matter. That's the thing here too, is that not not everything is like this complete black and white yes and no. You need to do this and you can't do this. And if you do this, you're a failure, because that's what? Again, shame. And that doesn't help anybody. So no matter where you are on your nutrition journey, where you are on loving your body and taking care of your body in ways that are sustainable and quote unquote healthy in the terms of you feel good and will have longevity as a human being on this planet, not in terms of being as skinny as possible and deriving your self-confidence from that, because that's not useful or helpful or sustainable as well. So nutrition is a huge part of this. I've done a lot of this studying for myself personally, so you need to do that for yourself as well. Get interested in it. It is possible, but it is hard to be interested in something that you feel shame around, right? That one task that you want to do, but now it's been 8 weeks since you told yourself you were going to do it. So now you just shame yourself, and it just kind of snowballs on this. And then you're ignoring a really important part of your life for an extended amount of time, when really, if you just got curious and discovered some novel pieces of whatever you're attempting to learn to actually hack your motivation into getting there, it can be really helpful. So get interested in your nutrition. Look into it. It doesn't need to cost money. You can look online. There's so many things about nutrition. But again, be mindful of who you're reading, why they're writing it, and if they are incentivized to monetize anything to you, because that's a red flag. Get out of there if they're trying to sell you that AG1 green juice. I really hate green juice because nobody really needs green juice. I'm sorry. Unless you are in an incredible deficit of these nutrients, and also your body can't even absorb all the nutrients that are supposedly in that green juice. Our bodies aren't even capable of that at once. So yeah, unless you are extremely deficient and bordering on needing medical attention, you're not going to need the green juice. So nutrition is important. Look into it. It can contribute to your overall feeling in your body, the feeling in your brain, your mental state, your sleep, everything. What you choose to put in your body can make a big difference. That doesn't mean that it needs to be 100% right and good all the time. It doesn't mean you're a failure if you deviate from those standards, but the more awareness you have of these things would probably lead you to making more lifelong sustainable decisions. Okay, so the next one is saying no to other people. Having boundaries. Again, a lot of this comes down to your mental health, being able to say no to other people, know when you need to take a break. I struggle with this. I love saying yes, not necessarily in the people-pleasing way. I don't really have that much of a problem disappointing other folks. Not when I said I would do something and then I didn't, but if somebody really wants me to do something and I have plans, or there's something that I know I need to do instead, or just fundamentally I don't want to go and that person would be disappointed in me if I didn't. If somebody wants to do something that I don't want to do, I'm really good at saying no, but that is through practice. So practicing your boundaries, being able to say no, knowing when you need a break, all of this is highly personal as well, because I have such a higher social battery than a lot of folks I know. I love being out because that's when I relax, is when I'm out with friends and talking and, cackling like a couple of witches over a G&T. Like, that's where my soul battery is recharged, and not everybody is the same. So be mindful of your boundaries. You have to solidify them. Doesn't mean you're always going to be good at holding them up, but your boundaries need to be there because they are important, especially if it would stress you out. Okay, the next one is the sun, vitamin D, being outside, touching grass, being in nature. Like, so much of that is really important. And I think sometimes we forget how important it is just being in the presence of a sun, up to and including about 10 minutes. That's really the duration of time where our body sees the most benefit from the sun and vitamin D. Of course, you need to be wearing sunscreen because melanoma is a thing. Don't be tanning. Tanning's not good. I've had tanning phases, but that's why I do self-tanner now. So being outside, make sure you're wearing sunglasses, protect your eyes from those UV rays, protect your skin from those UV rays. But being outside, being in nature, hiking, if that's something that's available to you as well, can be very meaningful. Get outside, go hug a tree. I'm not really kidding that much. Go and hug a tree. It might feel silly, but it is kind of fun. And connecting with nature is a huge part of taking care of yourself, because we all are part of the same system, and feeling connected to your environment is a huge part of feeling connected to yourself, because ultimately we are our own environments. That's something that I've definitely learned and internalized spending time with Indigenous folks in my community, because the concept of not only taking care of your environment, but feeling connected to your environment and the land upon which we walk is something that I find really inspiring. So going out there, if you have Indigenous people in your life that you can learn from, elders that you can talk to, resources that you can find to really hone in on your connection to nature, I felt a very strong improvement in my mental health and in my ideas of how self-care works for me, because of the ways that I choose engaging in my environment. And one of those examples for me is a sit spot. I feel like I've talked talked about this in a podcast, but I don't remember, so don't stop me if you've heard this before. So the sit spot is something that I believe some folks in the Blackfoot culture participate in, but you find a spot out in nature, and that is your sit spot. That's where you go 10 minutes a day, and you just sit in that spot and you notice. Right? You're paying attention to your senses. What do you feel? What do you see? What do you hear? That's only 3, but I'm sure there's other senses as well. I'm pretty sure there's 5. I was an elementary teacher, but I guess that was too long ago because now I forgot the other senses. Oh, what can you taste? Yeah, sure. That's important, I guess. Anyway, going out and sitting in the same spot consistently, and really you start to build this relationship with the spot that you're sitting in. And it's really interesting to watch the environment around you change with the seasons. That's when I felt the most investment really come up out of me, when I was engaging in my sit spot. It's down by the river. It's so beautiful. I love it. I love going there. It is kind of similar to this idea of meditation, but being able to just be and be present. There's no sound other than the environment around you, noticing the things changing through the seasons. It's beautiful. I love it. The sit spot, go look into it if you're interested in it. I can't speak highly enough of having a sit spot. I love it. Oh, I haven't been out there today yet. I need to go after this. Anyway, the next one here is taking care of yourself through organization and being kind to future you. This is something that I do a lot. I think about my future self a lot. If it takes less than 10 minutes to do it and you have the time to do it now. Don't put it off. It's really hard to get into. Like, procrastination is absolutely a thing. It is something that is influenced by your brain chemistry as well. So there are different conditions and chemical imbalances in your brain that might preclude you from the ability to engage in those behaviors, even if they're small. So I get that. I understand it. I've been there. But you need to do things that you're not interested or motivated to do so you can build habits, because the more that you solidify those neural pathways in your brain of doing the small things that don't take a lot of time immediately in the moment, it can really set you up for long-term success. But I'm also a Virgo with an undiagnosed attention disorder. So I love lists. I love writing things down. I love calendars. I have like 4 different calendars for different things. And I like crossing things off lists. I like pencils and stationery and all of those things. So that's particularly motivating for me. It might not be for you, but you do need to have some sense of organization to your life in order to be successful, whatever that looks like for you. So get curious with your organization. This is just me, but I love sitting down at something like the cupboard underneath of my bathroom sink and like pulling all of it out and cleaning it all out and organizing it all and using my bins and just stacking it all up and making it look nice, and my Ziplocs and how this is all organized. And I'm a highly organized person, very highly, to a fault. So I can't give you any more specific advice because it might not be healthy the way that I organize things, but I love organization. You hear that? The sweet, sweet sound of organization? I do. I always hear it. Reading is another one here. So you can be reading for pleasure in the terms of like fiction or something like that. I can't do that personally. I love taking in fictional movies and TV shows, but for me personally, I can't read a fictional book. I really don't know what it is. I've tried a lot of times. I literally can't finish it if I know that it's fake. But if it's a true story, I am good with reading that. I enjoy that kind of stuff. But I like reading textbooks. I like reading studies. I like reading people's memoirs. I love drag queen books, like comedy books where it's just somebody talking. I love that kind of stuff. And that can be a part of your self-care journey as well. So look into reading if that's something that might be interested to you. It continues to talk about carving out time for your self-care. This can kind of be hard if you don't know what it's going to look like yet, but having this unstructured time where you can start to get curious about the things that are around you. A huge part of self-care is doing things that you enjoy. And if you're not sure about what you enjoy, you need to leave space for you to be curious, like a little kid who's bored and doesn't know what to do. And eventually you'll find yourself getting into something that's not scrolling on your phone. So leave this extra time in your schedule if that's something that is possible for you, to get curious about the things that are around you, because you can really find some interesting things that you enjoy doing out of nothing. That's been particularly helpful for me, is just scheduling time where it just says chill. I'm looking over at all of June and I think I had 3 chill days written in. 2 of them so far I've not chilled out and taken on extra projects because I thought, oh, this is a free day. So hold up that boundary with yourself. If you're planning on doing nothing, that will turn into something, but it'll be in terms of self-care. That's not actual monetized work. I just made more YouTube videos. I didn't do anything that was self-care related. If anything, it took away from my self-care. But yeah, guard those things. Guard the time that you carve out for self-care, if that's something that's feasible for you to do. It doesn't need to be a whole day, but it can be parts of a day, or it can just be built into your routine. It can be something that you do in the morning when you wake up, or maybe on a lunch break, or maybe before you go to sleep, things like that. And make sure that you commit to those things as long as they're working for you. But unfortunately, you're not going to know if something's working for you unless you engage in it at least for 21 days, because that's how long it takes to build a habit. But the problem is, and I hate the idea of like, oh, young people don't want to work anymore, and like everybody wants instant gratification and that, but there is an amount of time that you need to engage in a behavior that you are expecting to improve your life in some way. You need to do it for an amount of time before you're actually going to see results. It's like going to the gym. I've been in the gym for like years now at this point, and I didn't see any meaningful, visible changes in my body until I was like 6 months in, 8 months in. And even now that I'm a handful of years into this, it's still small changes, but we're really motivated by results. And if you don't have results in the beginning, that can be demotivating. So be prepared to keep yourself motivated, even though the results aren't there yet. You are the worst assessor of your own behavior and where you've come from because you're very biased, because you're criticizing yourself. So this can be where the journaling comes in handy. Like, take out your camera and start vlogging if that's something that's interesting to you. You know what, Oprah, I take it back. Go get the gratitude journal, girl. Go write things down, because if you can take yourself back into the mindset of who you were an amount of time ago, it can be really motivating to see where you come from. Where did you go? Cotton Eye Joe kind of deal. Because we can forget where we've come from, because that's kind of just how the human brain works. We're really good at adapting to change. So you might not notice those changes that can be meaningful for you if you need motivation to keep going. Okay, so there's 3 more things here in this article that I want to bring your attention to. The first one is, are you obsessed with productivity or optimizing your life? My answer would be yes. Like I said, I am a Virgo with an undiagnosed attention problem, so I am obsessed with optimizing my life. I want to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. I don't like making mistakes. All of these things for me really contribute to an anxious existence, because I don't want to relax, because I can monetize this. What can I be doing while I'm relaxing that will put me farther ahead in anything that I'm attempting to achieve in my life? So be mindful if you're somebody who sounds like me and you just want to capitalize off of every moment, because ultimately that's not healthy. That motivation is good and powerful, and that hard work can really get you far, but it can also lead to burnout, which is another part of this conversation. I've read some research that it takes you half of the amount of time it took you to put you into burnout to actually get you out of burnout. And I'm pretty sure that I was in burnout mode from like 2013 to 2023. It was about a decade that I was in burnout mode, just perpetually burnt out. And I'm still getting myself out of it. I feel like I'm almost there. I've come a really long way, but burnout is no joke, man. Like, it takes so much time to get yourself out of burnout. And it's not just this like woo-woo thing. It is a neuroscientific thing that has been studied. Like, burnout changes the function of your brain, not necessarily the structure like we talked about before, but burnout is so bad on your body, and the amount of cortisol levels that you have, it can reduce your life. And I don't want to say that in like I'm trying to shame you or scare you, but that's just the reality. Taking care of yourself can improve not only the length, but the quality of your life. And even if you don't care about the length of your life, you should care about the quality of your life. Because even if you make it to 102, are those going to be good years? Are those going to be good, enjoyable years? Because you don't want the length if it's not going to be quality, you know? I mean, you probably don't. But me personally, I don't want to live long if it's not going to be a high quality of life. I would rather have high quality of life until 65 instead of having a low quality of life from 50 to 102. You know what I mean? That's why this stuff is important to me. Okay, so don't be obsessed with productivity. You know, it's not shameful. I get where you're coming from. I'm the same exact way. The next one is kind of in the same category. Does it make you feel guilty? Again, you shouldn't be ashamed of taking time for yourself. It's okay to not be productive. You will fall short of your own expectations, probably, because most of us are very hard on ourselves. We're our own worst critics. So being able to be kind to yourself in the moments where you don't hit the standards that you most likely arbitrarily set for yourself is really important. Be kind to yourself. God, be kind to yourself. Be so nice to yourself. Stop being mean to you. Okay? Okay, so this very last one here before we take a break is talking about the fun scale. Now, this one was interesting to me. So it says, we can all admit that self-care isn't always fun. Essential care tasks like bathing, grocery shopping, or brushing your teeth probably don't get you excited. It is still important to make these tasks a priority. However, if you've nailed the basics and are looking to incorporate additional activities, using the fun scale can be helpful, and here's how it works. The fun scale is a continuum that can help you gauge how much enjoyment or benefit you get out of certain activities or actions. So there's 3 different types, and this is type 1. This applies to activities that you enjoy in the present moment, such as going on a walk or a hike, my sit spot, eating a satisfying meal, or spending time with friends. These are the types of activities you enjoy while you're actively doing them and create good memories after they're completed. Number 2, this kind of fun encompasses activities that may feel challenging or unpleasant in the moment, but you'll still look back on experiencing them and feel rewarded. These types of activities can include a difficult hike or a workout, engaging in counseling, or training for a race. So this one's interesting because it's almost talking about how you may be demotivated to do this thing before you start while you're doing it, but it's that rush of endorphins or dopamine that you get after engaging in that activity. And I think that's a really important note here, because you cannot be motivated to do the things that you know are good for you, but it's having that conceptualization of what you're going to feel like after that kind of fun is done. And maybe this is where that like instant gratification comes from, is that a lot of folks want to engage in type 1 of fun, which can be smoking cigarettes, but type 2 of fun might take a little bit more work for you to get to, but it's ultimately more rewarding, more long-term, and more sustainable. And then the third type of fun is following the same pattern, but again, it's a little bit harder. So this applies to things that are unpleasant or challenging in the moment, and they don't make you feel better or accomplished after the fact either. This can include type 1 and type 2 activities that have gone wrong, as well as other subjective experiences. These activities don't serve you well compared to type 1 or type 2 fun. If you find yourself engaging in type 3 self-care, it may be time to reevaluate your plan. And this might fall into the category of like the Oprah stuff that we were talking about before. It doesn't make you feel good before you do it. It doesn't make you feel good while you're doing it or after. So why are you doing it? You might be being sold a lie, right? Or you might be engaging in a kind of self-care that wouldn't work for you. It stands to reason that some of the things that I've walked through in this episode wouldn't be helpful to you and would be type 3 fun for you. But that's the point. You need to find out what it is for you, right? Because you're you, babes. You're so unique, and I love that about you. But it does kind of mean that you need to engage in a little bit of work to figure out who you are and what you can do to make self-care the most meaningful for you. Okay, babes, I talked for a really long time, but I guess that's what a podcast is. So I'm gonna go sit on the air conditioner, have a sip of water, and when we come back, I'm just gonna talk about me. Yeah, this isn't really going to be self-care related. I'm going to talk about me, the future of this podcast, where I am kind of a personal check-in for those of you who are interested in me and my journey. But yes, if you are leaving now, though, I want to thank you for staying with me. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you're interested in listening to any of the other ones, I would really appreciate that. Comment and subscribe, do all the things. Thanks for being on this journey. But we are going to come back in just a moment, and I'm going to show you the vulnerability that the judges have been looking for. Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, babies, thanks for sticking around. I'm glad you're here for this last part. I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to my content, supporting me in whatever ways that you do. I don't really know exactly what I want to say, but this might just be my out loud gratitude journal. If you know me, if you've taken in any other forms of my content, you might know that I was living in a small town that was pretty homophobic, and I was in a spot in my life where I just wasn't happy. And I was in a very dark place for about a year, and I dealt with a lot of feelings that I wasn't comfortable with. I was in and out of some intensive therapy. I don't know why I want to say this, because I'm very mindful of the ways that I'm taking my experience and sharing my experience with all of you out here online, but I was on the edge. I was, for an amount of time, and it was really sad. It was really sad. I was really sad. And I struggled for so long trying to muster up the courage to do the things in my life that I knew that I was meant for and that I really wanted to do. I wanted to start a podcast. I wanted to share my light with the world because I knew that I had something to offer, but I wasn't bringing it to the tables and into the rooms that I was in at that time. And some of it had to do with my low self-confidence because of growing up in a discriminatory world that told me I didn't belong, but it also was because of the blatant homophobia and discrimination that I faced in the communities that I was in. So I struggled so hard. I made the decision to move and do all of these things. And maybe online, if you were paying attention, and it didn't really seem like I was struggling that much. And I think that's something that you have to keep in mind when you are watching content creators, because a lot of their online presence are the wins, and people aren't necessarily sharing their losses. So this is maybe that for you, because I went through almost a breakup stage of the life that I thought I was going to have. It's this idea of mourning the life that you thought you were going to have, but you need to leave this old life behind you in order to attain something new and something bigger. I know that I'm meant to be seen. I know that I'm meant to be out here sharing my perspective with the world because it is important. And I know that I am supposed to be out here sharing my perspective with the world. And if you're somebody who identifies with that, if you're potentially in a space like this, I just want to say that it will get better. It will get better. It will get better. And it does kind of link into this idea of self-care for me, because if you take what you're struggling with right now, if you take those ideas of inadequacy and funnel those negative feelings into your art, into your creation, into your strategies in which you show up into the world, if you put all of that pain and hurt and anger into what you enjoy doing, it will flourish. So I want to say that where you are right now is okay. It's valid. I'm not here. I don't want this to sound shamey. I don't want you to feel ashamed of where you are right now, even though you probably already do, because I definitely did for a long time, because on paper I had everything that I ever wanted, but it didn't feel like it was enough. So feel confidence that you do have the power to go out into the world and get the things that you want, no matter what it is that you want. There are limitations. There are structural limitations and financial limitations and so many things that can hold you back. But I do think it is very powerful to take that onus to an appropriate amount, to put that onto yourself, because you do have the power to change a lot of aspects of your life. And I am proof of that. When I look back to who I was even 6 months ago, but if we look even just like 1 year and 1 day as I was leaving my cushy white picket fence job as a permanent full-time certified teacher in Alberta, I was terrified. I was terrified. And so many people around me would say things like, I just can't believe you're doing this. Like, you just have the confidence to do that? You think you can do that? And almost like who do you think you are? Right? And it's not that I think that I'm better than anybody. I think everybody has a voice that can be developed to a point where they can share it with the world and it would be something that is valuable. I do fundamentally believe that. I don't think I'm different from anybody else because of things that I don't have control over. Right? I wasn't born this way. I earned this way. So I put in the time, the energy, the development into myself to be able to purport myself as a public figure and come and bring these podcast episodes to you. So I want to instill within you listening to this, yes, right now, you sitting there crocheting or driving or doing whatever it is that makes a podcast consumable for you. Maybe you're folding your laundry. You can change your life. You can go out there and do the things that you want to do. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of hard work and time. There are going to be roadblocks. You are not going to feel good about it most of the time, but it is possible. And you do need to engage in things for an amount of time before you see results. I went out and drag and schlepped myself into these spaces that I wasn't comfortable in and didn't know anybody in. And it was uncomfortable and I was filled with anxiety and I would have panic attacks. And I had to work through being able to put my content online and just confidently share my perspective and my voice, and not in terms of like what I had to say, but literally the sound of my little queer voice here filming and recording this podcast right now. There was so much mental work that had to take place before I was able to confidently put myself into the world, dealing with hate comments and people that disagreed with me. There's so much work that goes into these things. But if we think about like those levels of fun, for me, that is level 2 of fun. It's not particularly motivating to engage in that behavior before you do it, even while you're doing it. But on the other side, oh my God, it can really change everything. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting me in whatever ways you have, whether that's in real life when you see me, whether that's on YouTube where you're subscribed and you're liking and commenting, whatever, or if it's on Spotify where you're asking questions or leaving a review or just listening, or maybe on Instagram and TikTok where you're just watching my videos or liking or following me on there. I appreciate you so much for taking in this content of mine, following along with my journey. This is the end of season 2. There was a moment about halfway through the season where I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to keep filming these podcasts. And I almost stopped. It was about episode 5 or 6 where I thought I could just cut this one halfway. I really could. I'm kind of done with filming these. And I'm really glad that I didn't, because especially these last handful of episodes here have been really meaningful for me to record. So I hope they are meaningful, or at the very least entertaining for you to listen to through my perspective and through my queer little voice here on this podcast. I know I've said thank you so many times, but honestly, I love you, babes. Thanks for supporting me. I see see you. I appreciate you. I do have peripheral plans to bring season 3 of my podcast. I'm not sure when it's going to start. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but I do have plans to come back probably later in the end of 2024, somewhere in there. You know, when the snow flies and I need something to do again that's not being outside in nature and doing all of that. But if you're listening to this when it comes out, I have been out of Calgary for 3 weeks at this point. So now I have a handful of days before my summer semester starts where I go to Lethbridge and spend some time at the U of L learning about education and neuroscience. And then I'm going on a big old road trip because Does Size Matter Part 3, the remix, is definitely going to happen. There's going to be a lot of vlogging content of that road trip as well. It's going to be a 2-week journey driving down through the west coast of Canada, the United States, almost down all the way to Mexico, over back up through Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, the whole bit. It's going to be amazing. There's going to be so much YouTube content, Instagram, TikTok content that's going to come out of that. I'm so excited to bring that to life and share that with you. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel, like this video if you like the video. And for the last time of season 2, babes, oh, this is so overwhelming for me right now because I didn't picture my life getting here, but here it is. Here's the end. You look great today. Thanks for listening. And until the next one, goodbye.